the Ad Hoc Committee is engaged with, and which is also, of course, an issue facing the Nhlanhla Commission. And as I think everyone here knows, it's a question which starts with the fact that our Minister of Police, Senzo Mkhwanazi, issued an instruction on the 31st of December 2024, in which he ordered that the political killings task team be shut down. So just what I just want to clarify then is just that while we acknowledge that there are other issues before the committee, and I want to refer specifically to the issue which Honourable Sauls raised of this crisis around the deadly danger faced by many whistleblowers, and I would particularly like to support and affirm the issue that you raised about the need to see that issue as an issue of profound urgency. But our submission, and all I'm going to be speaking to, is the issue of how to prevent inappropriate political interference. And it obviously raises questions about how we conceive of the question of inappropriate political interference. So in discussions about the instruction that Minister Mkhwanazi issued, there have been questions, for instance, was it, did this constitute inappropriate operational interference? Should there have been another process followed that involved consultation with for instance, the National Commissioner, questions about the motivation behind the instruction, and also then a related issue, but has been about questions about the political killings task team itself and about its effectiveness. Also, I think Sean Tate then has also emphasized that likely to be on Parliament's agenda in 2026 is the SAPS Act Amendment Bill. And so one of the questions that emerges is does this present an opportunity for Parliament to introduce legislative measures to try and do more to limit the potential for inappropriate political interference? So just to give it to you in a nutshell, what I'm going to be doing is proposing a way of looking at this issue of political interference, focusing on this question of the role of the minister and the relationship between the minister and the National Commissioner, and the directions that are issued by the minister to the National Commissioner. What I just want to also maybe just make clear at this point, and hope it will become clearer as my presentation progresses, is that what I've heard in the meeting that I've attended so far today, and in other discussions and conversations that I've heard about Minister Mkhwanazi's instruction, is there consistently what emerges is this idea that there's something called policy and there's something called operational issues, and that the minister's authority should be to issue policy and not operational issues, and not operational instructions. And basically, what I'm going to argue is that this is using this distinction, relying on that distinction, is inadequate for trying to regulate how the minister exercises his or her authority over the police. And so I'm going to be suggesting an approach to how the minister, how this can be addressed in legislation that has some correspondence with some of the recommendations that were made by AthCOF. So what I would then just like to refer to is, so what are the powers of the minister? And I think what I'm just going to refer to here is just the powers that are conferred on the minister in terms of legislation. In terms of the Constitution. So there are other powers that are conferred on the minister by legislation. But if one looks exclusively at the Constitution, then I'm going to rely on the way in which the Mkhwanazi Commission summarized these powers. So the Mkhwanazi Commission said that the minister's powers can be understood as having three components as articulated in the Constitution. The one is a political responsibility for policing. That's referred to in Section 2061. The one is that the minister must determine national policing policy, and that's provided for in Section 2061 and 2, and there's references to the role of the provinces in contributing to those provinces. But the third thing is that in Section 2072, Section 2072 says that the National Commissioner must exercise control over and manage the police service in accordance with the national policing policy and the directions of the cabinet member responsible for policing. So this provision, Section 2072, at face value, it seems to be saying that the minister has the authority both to issue national policing policy and to issue directions. And by implication, directions are not synonymous with national policing policy. So then also what I just want to refer to then is just something that was an assertion made in the affidavit submitted to the Nhlanhla Commission by Major General Van Rooyen from the SAPS Legal Department. And she said that neither Chapter 11 of the Constitution, which is the chapter regulating the policing and the military and so on, neither Chapter 11 of the Constitution nor the SAPS Act provide any clear guidance on the ambit or scope of the police, of the policy or directives that the minister may issue. So what I also just want to, I'm trying to just pay attention to the chairperson's wish that I try and give a sort of high level, a kind of tighter version of my presentation. What I wanted to, I think, maybe just highlight is that while the minister has had an authority to issue national policing policy that's been embodied in the Constitution since 1996, this, in practice, this authority or responsibility is one that has largely been kind of dormant. So what we've had is a number of ministers of police since 1996, and what we could say is that if we were to compare them with each other, it's clear that they've had different styles of engagement, different levels of engagement with the police. So, for instance, if we look at some of our ministers, some of them have been quite heavily occupied with mediating local level upheavals around crime and policing. And sometimes, as it happens in the process of engaging with communities, they often seem to make commitments which are a type of operational commitments on the part of the police. They quite often seem to make commitments that involve promising that greater police resources will be provided to that specific community. So, and so what I would suggest then is that up to this point, we haven't really been able to develop a type of mechanism or machinery which is able to effectively assist the minister in addressing the critical questions facing our policing system. And so the one reservation that I have about the idea that one would like to confine the minister's role in relation to the police to that of making policy is that my impression would be that we don't really have an effective policy development capacity which support the minister adequately in performing that kind of role. So what we do have now is, for the first time, what we have is a document that was signed by Minister Mkhwanazi on the 3rd of December, 2024, which is called the National Policing Policy 2025. So this is the first time that we've had a document which is called the National Policing Policy. A few things about this policy: the process of developing this document started in 2022, a draft was circulated in 2023, and as I've indicated, it was finally signed off by Minister Mkhwanazi in virtually at the end of 2024. So the process of developing this policy took close to 3 years. But I would also like to, and so also what was involved in this process was quite a high level of consultation with role players within the police, with other personnel within the criminal justice system, and then also with stakeholders and role players outside of the state and in society more broadly. So what we have then is what my observation about this type of process would be that that it is a helpful process in broadly understanding the perceptions of people about the policing system, but it doesn't necessarily lead to enable our policy-making machinery to kind of answer many of the critical questions that are facing our policing system. For instance, questions about the types of recruitment strategies that are being implemented and how to strengthen those recruitment systems and so on. So a further point that I just want to make now is just that moving the focus slightly is, if we were to talk about political influence of over the police. So now I'm talking about, I'm not talking about inappropriate political interference. I'm talking about how politics operates in South African society and how that influences policing. And so what is clear is that, a lot of political influence that's expressions of concern and political pressure on police, whether we're talking now about from the minister or from within parliament or from other sources within society, including the media, for instance, focus on questions to do with police priorities and the use of police resources. And so associated with this, there's a tendency to establish task teams or units to focus on specific aspects of the crime problem. So the one concern that one might have is that political influence of this kind neglects broader questions about the impact of such measures on other equally serious types of crime. But the basic point that is most relevant to this presentation is that this type of political influence, which, as I've said, is often the focus of expressions of political concern regarding policing in South Africa, is simultaneously operational and of a policy nature, insofar as it focuses on questions about priorities. It could be seen as engaging with questions of policy. On the other hand, it is also very directly about how police resources are used and deployed. And so the point that I'm making is merely to illustrate that this idea of a clear distinction between policy and operations is not, doesn't necessarily, isn't necessarily easy to apply. And as I've suggested, on its own particularly, it's not adequate as a way of regulating the manner in which the minister exercises his or her authority over the police. So I just also then want to make a few points about inappropriate political influence. So the one point is, and this comes from studies of policing in African countries and also notably in Australia. The first point that comes up is that political leaders often appoint police leaders who are politically aligned with them. And so, and related to that, there's a tendency on the part of police leadership generally to comply with the directives that they receive from their political masters. So what, for instance, been observed in Australia is that it's frequently only when there's been a change in political power and a new political party has come into office and a new minister is appointed, that these disputes between the minister and the chief of police emerge as a controversy in the public domain. The further point that just is also emerges from analyses that have been conducted of inappropriate political interference is that political interference is generally conducted, the communication through which ministers of police or other political officials engage with police leaders is often of a sort of informal nature, often of a verbal nature. That it's very rare that it's formalized in written form, particularly if it has some irregular elements to it. And so this takes us to the point, which is the proposals that we are making, which is about regulating political interference. And as I indicated, this overlaps in some ways with the points that APCOF have made. So basically, there's four proposals, and there's and what I'm going to do just fairly quickly, I hope, is refer to a few examples from foreign jurisdictions where these types of provisions have been incorporated. So the first type of legal provision would be a requirement that prior to issuing a direction to the National Commissioner, the minister must consult with him or her. The second one would be that any directions are reduced to writing. The third one, which is overlaps with or resembles proposals made by APCOF, was that copies of all directions must subsequently be provided to Parliament or Committee of Parliament. And then the fourth one is that legislation should specify in some way a minimum set of issues that may not be addressed in ministerial directions. So the examples that I've got are firstly from Kenya. And so what you do have in the Kenyan Police Act is a requirement that directions from the minister be provided in writing. In the state of Victoria in Australia, so Victoria has a federal system and there's different legislative regimes governing the police in each of the different Australian states. In the state of Victoria, there is then this provision that reads, the minister may, after consulting the chief commissioner, so there's firstly the requirement of consultation with the chief of police, give written directions, again, to the chief commissioner in relation to the policy and priorities to be pursued in the performance of the functions of the Victoria Police. And then the following section then lists a set of issues, which it says directions issued under the preceding section cannot address the following types of issues. And I can provide members of the committee with the list of issues that are listed in the Police Act in Victoria. There's a slightly different approach then that is taken in the state of Queensland in Australia, where rather than saying what directions by the minister may not address, the legislation then says they may only address the following types of issues. And so on this point of subsequently or ensuring the transparency of any directions that are issued to the National Commissioner, what we, again, there's examples both from Australia, Victoria in Australia and from Queensland, which illustrates slightly different approaches. So in the Police Act in Victoria then says that copy of all directions must be published in the Government Gazette and also published on the website of the Victoria Police. And then the Queensland Police Service Act, similar to the proposals made by APCOP, refers to the requirement of some kind of register and are actually quite complex in terms of different public bodies that this register must be submitted to, but they include the Legislative Assembly. Just one further variation on these types of approaches is in New Zealand, where, so as I've said, the Victoria Police Act says that outlines issues that may not be addressed by the minister in his or her directions to the chief of police. What the New Zealand Police Act says that if the commissioner receives directions dealing with the following types of issues, then the commissioner is not responsible for implementing them, and that the commissioner must act independently in relation to these issues. And these include any action, the investigation of specific people or action against specific groups of people, and also generally these lists of issues then include also things like decisions about, for instance, appointments or promotions of individual employees, and also disciplinary matters within the police. So just by way of conclusion then, some of the points we've, that our presentation speaks to is that policy making is embedded in the Constitution as a responsibility of the minister, that up to this point, a political system has not sustained a responsive capacity for policy development. That also we would caution against almost a heavy-handed approach to dealing with the issues, the issue of the risk of inappropriate political interference, insofar as one does not want to prevent the minister from exercising appropriate executive functions in relation to the police. And a further point, which has been, a key focus of this submission, is that many political interventions regarding police have operational impacts as they focus on setting priorities and ensuring that police resources are focused on specific crime problems. And so then what we suggest is that rather than limiting the minister to policy, emphasis should be on requiring consultation with the National Commissioner, written directions, ensuring transparency, and then also delineating a minimum core set of issues that should not, around which the minister has no authority over the police. And there's just one final word, which is because I've, in this presentation and in our submission, we focus on the relationship between the minister and the National Commissioner. But there's a further point, which is just that, and I think it has been, I'm not quite sure which honourable member of the committee made this point a bit earlier, but that in many ways, political influence of the police, including inappropriate influence, emanates from diverse sources. It might emanate from provincial legislatures. It might emanate from, for instance, local government, for instance, related to questions of public order, policing, and so on. And so there is a question about, insofar as, this committee does embrace the idea that, potentially amending the Police Act is one way of looking at addressing the issue of inappropriate interference. The point would be that the problem of inappropriate interference goes beyond merely a question of the powers and authority of the minister. And so then what I just want to, and this is my final words, is just then flag the fact that there is a reported, it was submitted to government in 2018 by a body called the Panel of Experts, which was appointed on the recommendations of the Mkhwanazi Commission, was appointed by the then Minister of Police, Nhlanhla. As it happens, I was a member of that panel, but recommendation 13 in that panel's report then also speaks to this question about the broader issue of political influence of the police and make some suggestions regarding legislative provisions that might be helpful in, let's say, empowering police to resist inappropriate types of political influence. And that's the end of my presentation. So I hope that in some way it will be of help to the members of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robert David Bruce from Institute for Security Studies. Honorable members, are you ready for rotation? I'm not allocating you the time that I have allocated you in the previous session, because I have noticed that my benevolence is being abused. Honorable James, you requested to leave. What time?
About 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Just waiting.
Is there anything you want to say before you leave?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Chair.
In case you may want to go, you are released.
Thank you, Chair.
Who else wants to leave? Honorable Sangweni, what time do you want to leave?
At 1800 hours, Chair.
Is there anything you want to say before you want to leave?
Yes, please, Chairperson.
Honorable Thopa.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. If I could leave by at latest 6:20, I would really appreciate it. And I just have one question.
You have one question. Honorable Diane Kolabanat.
Thank you, Chair. If I could also leave around 6, but I also have a question. Thank you.
How many questions?
Just one.
One. How many questions do you have, Honorable Sangweni?
A little more than one, Chair. Maybe four.
Can we take the members with single questions first? Starting with Honorable Thopa.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you for your benevolence. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just have that one question. You made the point that ministers sometimes make promises to the communities, and which are more operational, promises of money to certain communities and so forth. In your opinion, is this grandstanding, political interference, electioneering? Is it a mixture of all of it? Or is it actually just a genuine desire of the minister for strategic direction, but that strategic direction is then getting lost? I just want to understand your point that you made there. Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you. So I think the one point that I'm making is just, in practice, what type of role have our ministers of police been playing? So my one observation, I mean, as I said, I've been working in this field for for 30 years, and I might be seen as someone who's been observing ministers of police for 30 years. And so the one observation would be that some ministers of police are more engaged in the role than others. And I would refer to specific ministers of police who appear to have been very actively engaged in the role. Which I see as being in their favor. But then the style of engagement was through mediating in conflicts. And so my observation would be that they are effectively involving themselves in a type of firefighting. So, one could have an argument then about that whether that should be their role or not. But it's just in some ways where I'm going to is pointing out here that this is one of the situations where one has had ministers who are playing a role which has involves making operational commitments on the part of the police. Whether to what degree it involves consultation with, for instance, the National Commissioner or police leadership is never entirely clear. But so what it on the one hand illustrates is that ministers aren't really carrying this role of doing policing policy, but also that it illustrates this point. You see, I'm not sure. When people have raised this question as to whether this is something that a minister should or shouldn't do, it's not clear to me that it's something that they shouldn't be doing. But all I'm saying is that it illustrates a point where they are effectively becoming engaged in an operational side of policing. And so what then I'm arguing is that, well, that's not necessarily problematic insofar as long as there's a transparency and this can be subjected to some kind of, and at least it's not necessarily problematic. And then insofar as we have transparency around what the minister is doing, then we can interrogate that and assess whether it is inappropriate or not. But in relation to the specific minister that I'm referring to, and I think it has been one minister more than many of the others who played this kind of role, I'm not aware that questions were ever raised in Parliament about him having been played a role that was inappropriate. Did I clarify that for you?
Honorable Diane Collar-Barnett.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Bruce, hello to you. I'm very interested in your point 16 on page 7. Much of what launched this entire episode, the 2 investigations, etc., was based on whether or not the minister had the right legally to shut down the PKTT. That is one of the core elements, and that's from which came so much more. And that's possibly the entire rationale for what has come out. So you say here that the powers of the minister extend beyond the authority to issue national policing policy, but also has the authority referred to in section 207(2) to issue direction. And you say there's a reasonable interpretation of that section, that directions are distinct from policy. So it's quite different. And many people have said he only has the right to influence policy and not direction. So I see a quote here from Major General von Rooyen, who in her written submission said that neither Chapter 11 of the Constitution nor the SAPS Act provide any clear guidance on the ambit or scope of the policy or directives that the minister may issue. So what is your feeling on whether or not he had the right to close the PKTT, and perhaps comment on the method that he used to do so?
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, I think the one question is then about the motivation of the minister in closing the PKTT. And there's, it would be fair to say that there are serious suspicions about what his motives were. And the minister has, Minister Mkhwanazi has defended, his decision on the basis of, well, I'm not going to try and explain it in any depth, but on the basis of reconstituting supposedly decisions that had been taken about reconstituting the detective capacity of the SAPS, and it's the manner in which its specialized functions were structured. So, you see, I think that, the point that I'm making is that the directive that he did issue then, which was to close down a unit, to me, it's of the same, I think the word is sui generis, of the same family, of the same, as many political directives which are issued for specialized units of one kind or another to be established. So if we look at the establishment of the PKTT, that was, that was something that took place under political direction. And so, to me, establishing task teams and closing them down is something that, is equivalent. And so, insofar as ministers seem to be authorized, or the executive seems to be authorized to play a role in the establishment of task teams, it seems also to me then that similarly it is within its powers to play a role in the dissolution of task teams. That does not mean that underhand motives may not play a role in such decisions. So the further point then, you see, that I think that some of the answers to this question is not that the minister violated any formal provision that I'm aware of. There might be protocols of government that, for instance, you see, I mean, people have raised questions about the interministerial committee, and so there's a question about, were there protocols relating to interministerial committees that were still binding on the minister? I can't answer that question for you, but it's not clear to me that there were. And so, I would say that, my question is that there is not, a clear breach. My understanding is that the minister did not clearly breach any provision that I know about. And so, but I would, then look to measures such as of the kind that are suggested by ourselves in Ad Hoc as a way of, so for instance, it seems fair to say that even if there wasn't a violation of any existing provision, that the process that he followed was lacking in some kind of way. And so, introducing the requirement that any instructions of this kind, directions of this kind, should be preceded by consultation with the National Commissioner would seem to be a reasonable measure to try and limit the risk of what might have been a poorly considered instruction. Thank you.
Honorable Sangwe. At any time you may want to be recused, honorable members. My benevolence allows you to do so.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good afternoon, Mr. Bruce. I never thought I would ever agree with the Institute for Security Studies. But let me say, you know, today I feel like Honorable James, I feel vindicated. Not because, and I want to put this on record, not because it's in defense of Minister Nhlanhla or anything of that nature. I hold no brief to defend anybody, including Minister Nhlanhla. But I've always held a view that there is no way, and I mean, a lot of the time it's been a lone view, including in my party, there's no way a political principal can be given authority over a department, exercise oversight, and then is not able to give a direction, you know. And I think your arguments that speak to some of those matters, I agree with you insofar as we don't know the motive. I agree with you on issues of process, but most importantly, I agree with you on recommendations which say that we must be able to delineate what we regard as strategic, what we regard as operational, and people must not just throw those words around, you know, and then they're not able to explain it. So thank you so much for that submission. I just have a few questions, and maybe let me just start with this one, which was just irritating me a little bit because I couldn't make sense of it also in the context of what we've been dealing with. You said at some point that political leaders, please, I'm paraphrasing, so you'll tell me if I'm wrong. Political leaders tend to appoint as police people who are politically aligned with them. Now, at face value, there's probably nothing wrong with that statement, but I'm keen to find out what you base it on. Whether you're talking generally or you are referring to the South African situation. Over the last couple of months when we've been, engaging with these generals, none of them, for example, as far as I know, are members of the African National Congress, which has been the governing party. They don't come from there. So what do you base that on? What is your thinking around that? And then let me give you a second question so that when I come back for my third and fourth, I don't come back again. You've argued that Section 2072 creates this dangerous gray area around ministerial directions. Now, having read that section, what consideration have you given to how it may be better phrased in order to deal with this ambiguity while seeking to maintain, I suppose, what the intent of the legislators would have been in that case? Thanks, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you. Right. So in relation to your first question, what I would say, so it's about the assertion that political leaders tend to appoint police leaders who are politically aligned with them. And I wonder if that is entirely correct, but let's say that tends to appoint police leaders who are likely to be willing to do their bidding. So they might not be, of one mind with them politically, but likely to not contest, political type directives which they receive. And, insofar as I have managed to read about the experience with policing in many African countries, I think that the experience is consistently that, police leadership is generally compliant with the executive. And so this, because I believe it was you who referred to the question about inappropriate influence being to some degree anecdotal. And I think that resonates, I think, with the point which I'm making, which emerged from something that I was reading about policing in Australia, which is that you have a pattern where a certain political party is in power, and then the police leaders are generally happy to follow the directions that they receive from the political leaders that they've been appointed by. It's when there's a change in power in those countries, there's a new political party governing that state, and there's now political kind of differences of some kind, not necessarily clear what they are, between the police leadership and the political party in power, that you then have these kind of disputes taking place, where the police leadership starts expressing dissatisfaction with some of the directions or instructions that they're receiving. So it's, the absence of, and if we look at this issue in South Africa, does the fact that, in fact, the man whose allegations have been given rise to the creation of this committee is, in my understanding, is that he is extremely exceptional as a police leader in South Africa, insofar as he is virtually the only one, if not the only one, who's been willing to resist political directives. And so it's as a result.
Sorry, Mr. Bruce. I'm also speaking for my colleagues. Let's try and keep the show because we're running out of time. Thanks, sir. And the second one was on section 2072.
Right. Well, you see, I mean, your phrase that this is a dangerous gray area. You see, I'm not sure that it is a dangerous gray area. That wouldn't be my formulation. My formulation is purely that the Constitution does say these two things, and that up to this point, there hasn't really been engagement with what these provisions mean. So my understanding is that it's, from my understanding of how democracy works and should work, it is not necessarily appropriate to confine the minister's authority to one of making policy. That's my impression, subject to someone persuading me otherwise. And so I think my understanding is that it is not necessarily a bad thing that the minister has the authority to issue policy and to issue directions. What it does do is create the potential for that authority to be used in an inappropriate manner. And so the approach that we're taking in our submission is to try and ensure that Parliament is able to scrutinize the manner in which the minister exercises power. And it might also be seen that the National Commissioner would be given greater power to be empowered to resist inappropriate interference.
Okay. So, as I indicated, that the recommendations that are made here, I believe, are pragmatic. I mean, you're saying directions to be given in writing, made publicly available, specify what matters must be addressed in directions, minimum core issues, require minister to consult the commissioner. Just two quick and last questions on the recommendations itself. Now, if we were to adopt this minimum core model, I think it was New Zealand that you mentioned. In your view, which are the policing functions that you think that constitutionally should be insulated, from this political interference, so to speak? What would those look like? So what would be the core minimum areas? And then finally, I don't have a problem with the notion of a minister consulting the National Commissioner, but it doesn't mean that the minister cannot issue a directive after he has consulted. Maybe the phrasing would be after consulting the National Commissioner. And similarly, I mean, we've got that example in the communication sector now with the minister and ICASA. Similarly, the commissioner can voice their disagreement with the direction, minister acts, he issues the directive in writing, and a national commissioner, if they believe that an issue is ultra-virus, it's illegal, they can refuse to implement the instruction. And basically that's what you are recommending. Would that be a correct understanding?
So, for instance, I think that this kind of New Zealand example, where the legislative says that insofar as directions deal with the following, the National Commissioner is not required to comply with them and must act independently. I think that that's a good approach to it. On the question of what, those issues should be, there are obvious ones. The obvious ones are specific investigations against specific people. And I think a lot of people would include the conduct of specific public order operations, things like that. There's ones that tend to come up, which are, for instance, decisions regarding individual employees of the police department, including matters of discipline. But, I would say that, so for instance, but in Victoria, they've got a list of about 7 or 8 of these things. So, I mean, I think, there would have to be judgment exercised about what to include and exclude from that kind of thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nhlanhla.
Thank you very much, Chair. No, let me start by saying that we are vehemently opposed to the content of this presentation. We don't agree with it. There's no point that we agree with. So in its totality, doesn't make sense to us in its totality. One, it doesn't make sense in terms of the legal framework, but secondly, in terms of a problem that we're currently faced with here in this committee. Because our firm view is that, one, the minister does not have powers in terms of the current constitution and in terms of the South African Police Service Act to enter into operational issues. And if it does so, he is violating the constitution. The South African Police Service Act operationalizes Section 207 of the constitution. And it does not give powers, consciously so, to the minister to enter into operational affairs. Section 11 of the Police Service Act gives powers to the National Commissioner. And I think the reason behind this is that in most instances, in fact, in all instances, people who are appointed as national commissioners are people who are career policemen. People who have experience in the police, they were constables, detectives, brigadiers, and so on and so forth. That is why they are given powers, because a police institution is not an institution that you can gamble with. It's a very critical institution in governance. And to have a person who's the national commissioner, you require skills and expertise. And the minister is a politician, and there's no requirement for you to be a minister of police. If I love Honorable Mkhwanazi and I'm the president, and if I want him to protect me for my future shenanigans, I can simply appoint him because I know that he's my puppet. He will take all instructions that I'm giving to him. Whereas a commissioner is a well-qualified person in terms of experience, who understands better how to run an institution or a department called SAPS. So I think there is no issue here with the current legal framework. There's absolutely no issue. And if anything, the current legal framework was violated on the 30th of December 2024, when we were busy at home celebrating New Year. So to suggest that more powers must be given to the minister and the minister must be protected and so on and so forth is to want to exacerbate the situation. That is my comment. We don't agree with what you have said, and we think that your proposition can exacerbate the current quagmires that we are faced with. Number two, you have also spoken about a tendency to establish task teams. And my reading of your tone is that you seem to be against that. My understanding, my simple understanding, I've never been a police, but with the little experience that I have with regards to the running of the affairs in the police, is that a task team is appointed for a specific purpose and to address a particular problem. And that has worked because a unit is a unit that is established to deal with general issues of crime. And then when there is a specific problem which is rife, or when there is a specific scourge which is growing uninterrupted, and the police can't in their current form address that issue, there is a need to establish a task team. And practically, that has worked for the people of South Africa. It has worked in KZN. Before I'm speaking now as a citizen of KZN. Before 2018, there was no task team in KZN, and people were dying like flies. And evidence is tendered here that there was a collaboration of criminals and people who are in the police. Because what criminals do, they identify role players in the current setup of the police and want to capture them and use them for their criminal activities. And when there is a task team, it's not easy to do that because various people are deployed in terms of their expertise and experience to deal with a particular problem. So, in terms of the practical records, task teams have worked for the people of South Africa. That is why today there's peace in KZN. People are not dying. We're going to elections this year. If you know KZN very well, by now many people would have died if that task team was not established. So to suggest that a task team or to label it as a tendency to establish a task team, I think is a bit inconsistent and undesirable. It's peculiar. We don't agree with that because a permanent unit continues to focus in its competency, whereas a task team is established for a specific purpose. And when they have completely arrested that problem, then they get established. Now, another point that I wanted to raise is that I don't think there is a problem with the minister giving a direction, but there are requirements that must be met with that. One, a directive can only be given in terms of what is legally permissible. Two, a directive can be given through a comprehensive consultation with relevant people who have powers to make a determination in that directive. You can't, because you have powers. It's not an open-ended right or prerogative or discretion that you have as a minister. Because one day, if I have an open-ended right, I would wake up and say, Shongwe, you can pee here. And then I claim that I have a responsibility or a right, rather, a constitutional right to give a directive. Now, a directive can be implemented in terms of the legislation, and the legislation gives powers to the minister, to the national commissioner, not to the minister. So the minister doesn't have powers to intervene on operational issues. There is nowhere, there is no law that gives a minister powers currently. Maybe they are yet to be made, but currently in the legislation and in the constitution only says, section 207, subsection 2 says, the commissioner has a responsibility to control and manage services in the police service in consultation or in accordance with the directives of the minister. But it doesn't end there. It goes also to the act which gives, and the act gives only the national commissioner powers, section 11, only the national commissioner powers to deal with operational issues. And the act drills it down because it explains specifically and it specifies roles of the national commissioner to say he can do A, B, C, D, and 3. So there is a difference between issuing a directive and actioning something. A directive, in my understanding, if I can give a practical example, can be given in this way. If I have a right to issue a directive and Skosana has a right to manage this house, I can give a directive to Skosana to say, by 6 o'clock, I think, or firstly, I would consult with Skosana because he knows the house better than I, because he manages it on a daily basis, and ask him if it is appropriate for him to change that door. And if he says, as a person who has experience and as a person who manages this house, I think it is appropriate to change that door. And then I can say, you can, having made all such considerations, you can change the door. And not come with a date to Skosana. That is dictatorship from a general perspective. It's dictatorship and it's ultra virus. I can't come to Skosana and say, Skosana, tomorrow at 10 o'clock, who manages this house? At 10 o'clock, that door must have been changed. What kind of a directive is that? That's dictatorship. I can't give that instruction to a person who has statutory responsibilities which have been explained thorough in a legislation, and just give an instruction to say do A, B, C, and D, whereas I am not in charge of day-to-day responsibilities of doing what he does. So I don't have any question on your presentation. I'm crushing it from point 1 to the last point. We don't agree with it. It doesn't make sense to us. It appears to be more defensive than anything. It appears as a mouthpiece of Senzo Mkhunu. That is, it has been presented to paint a particular picture or to establish a particular defense. So there's no question. I was just engaging. Thank you very much. It's a comment.
Okay, thank you very much for the comments and taken note of the points that you've made. I think just my responsibility would be just to obviously reply to the last, was it a dig or a jibe or what? I'm not quite sure what you would call it, but that the submission was made in some ways in a way which was intended to favor one person or another person. And, I can state very clearly and without any hesitation that, that's just entirely not true. And the work forms part of work which is intended to support Parliament and support the government of South Africa in building an effective and sustainable democratic system, and that and that is the spirit and the motivation behind it. But thank you.
I'm not sure whether I should be a chair myself now. I think I'll chair this meeting because the chair has just left. He left.
The chair just spoke to you and indicated you must continue. Please, hands off the chair.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Bruce. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
One, this security studies, this Institute of Security Studies, is the one which was being led by then George Fivers, am I right? Or it's another one? The security study, or is it Jack Siller? I think it says.
Established by Yaki Siliers.
Okay. Who's funding it?
Your mic, please.
Your mic, please.
You're asking me because I would refer you to the website of the. I work with a specific program of the ISS.
So you don't know who's funding it?
No, I do know him by name. As it happened, there was just an announcement that was issued by the ISS, I think yesterday or today, regarding the resignation of the current director. So the director's post is currently in.
No, I'm aware of that, Mr. Bruce. My question again, it's who's funding the Institute for Security Studies?
Okay, well, can I refer you to a specific section of the website which deals with the governance system of the Institute for Security Studies, because I would have to consult that if I was to be able to provide you with a comprehensive answer to your question.
Oh, well, I'm not answered, but I thought that I hear, you know exactly who are the funders of this Institute for Security Studies.
I work with the ISS as a research on policing, and my work is very much focused on.
So if it's funded by drug dealers, you'll never know. You'll just say you are working there.
No, but I have confidence that it's not funded by.
No, you don't know.
Illicit sources of money.
No, you don't know.
No, I do.
You don't know. Let's leave it like that. I'll check the website.
No,
you don't know.
I do know that.
Then give me the answer if you know.
Okay, so I'm going to refer you to the website.
You see now, as I was saying, I'll look later on the website because you don't know for now.
Okay, no, but I have read the provisions of the website. I just can't.
Okay, no, let's leave it, Mr. Bruce, because of time. Major, you spoke about Major General Nhlanhla van Rooyen, who heads the legal department at SAPS, am I right? And you didn't say all what he said in the last, when he appeared at Nhlanhla Commission. In your submission, there's nothing about that. But let me help you. I'm going to make a comment. I'm not going to ask, because for me, really, I'm not sure why a coincidence.
We quoted Magda van Rooyen in our submission.
Yes, well, what did he say at the Nhlanhla Commission? Because what I'm saying here is not what I had and what I have. Maybe I didn't hear you well. Can you paraphrase it for me? Mike, please say.
The quote is that neither Chapter 11 of the Constitution nor the SAPS Act provide any clear guidance on the ambit or scope of the policy or directives that the minister may issue. So Major General van Rooyen was referring to particularly to Section 207(2) of the Constitution, as far as I understand, but also to 206(1) and 2, which authorize the minister to, on the one hand, issue national policing policy, and on the other hand, issue directives to the police. And her observation was that there's broadly a lack of clarity as to what the scope of these powers is.
Let me just contextualize it for you and with my comment now. Major General Petronel Magna van Rooyen, Subhead of Legal Service, testified that the Police Minister Senzo Mkhunu acted outside the authority and the legal mandate by ordering the brutal killing of a task team to be disbanded. She was very clear on that. I'm not sure how did you miss that in your submission. She argued it was an operational matter, not a political decision, and that the action severely hindered the investigation, suppressed cases, and ignored proper legal process. Do you remember that? Key points from her testimony at the Nhlanhla Commission of Inquiry. Overreaching of power. Van Rooyen stated clearly that the minister lacked the authority to disband the specialized unit, which are operational functions. Now, she testified that the rapid disbanding of the case at base PKTT had a negative consequences for the police work. And I think my colleague, Honorable Nomvalo, was arguing on that to say he has nothing to ask, because as far as Umkhonto we are concerned, what is submitted here was a tick box exercise, in our view. And I'm saying this to you, Mr. Bruce. Someone who reads this will say that we are defending something here, because hence I'm saying to you, in your submission, what I've read to you, you haven't said anything about that. And Magna, the legal head, was very, very clear on that. I'm not going to quote sections you've been, the section 207, I serve in the police portfolio committee, by the way. The section which you being emphasizing on here might be misleading, and I'm saying this to you with due respect. Magna said it all. We don't have to revisit that. By the way, he's the head of legal service in that department, and highly qualified for that matter. He's a PhD holder. And I read about the issue of New Zealand, you know, Queensland, what they do, in Kenya, what they do. You know, our history in this country, as you know, if you've been here for a very long time, because some of Europeans arrived not earlier, you know, some are born here, some they've got dual citizenship, some, you know, but our historical background, it's of such a nature that it's not easy to forget what happened in the past. Hence, my colleague gave you an example of KwaZulu-Natal, that the PKTT work wonders. If it was not the PKTT, Hence, now we are saying it was really premature to have disbanded that PKTT. And others, which are some of them are not disbanded. In particular, we're worried about this PKTT. Hence, we are sitting here today at the Ad Hoc Committee. This could have been prevented, if there was no interference at all. We will find ourselves in here. So we've got dynamics as compared to these other countries. Other countries, they might not have what we have here. There's a lot of issues in this country which we need to be attended to. And we think that in terms of the constitution which earlier when Advocate Hoffman was here, the Roman Dutch law, as far as we are concerned as well, we still have to, as lawmakers, you need a majority to amend this constitution. We are not happy. There's a lot of gaps which have to be closed in this so-called the best constitution, which is misleading, by the way, but that's politically, that's not for you. But indeed, there's a lot to be done. But in terms of what I was saying to you, that I'm making a comment, I think you left what I've said deliberately about what Mkhwanazi said about the issue of interference, and the issue of the PKTT. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you.
Any comment?
Yeah, well, just a couple of points. One thing is that obviously you and Honorable Nhlanhla have raised a question about the utility of task teams. I don't agree with you that it's clear or straightforward that they have played a particularly useful role. I think that we're living in a country that has got a murder rate of something like 25,000 people a year, has enormously high levels of violent crime. KwaZulu-Natal itself also has very high levels of violent crime. The PKTT itself has, I have looked at discussions of the effectiveness of the PKTT. And, I think that's a complex question. I think that it's never straightforward to evaluate investigative units.
Now, are you saying Mkhwanazi is wrong? Because I don't want to waste some people's time.
Okay.
Are you saying Mkhwanazi is wrong?
And yeah, I would also just say that I wasn't sure, I wasn't clear. I had read the report that you were, I think the same one that you were reading from.
Yes.
And had been through parts of her testimony, but I didn't see any clear reference to an explicit provision that had been violated by the minister. And as I indicated in my response to Honorable Kola Barnard, what's never been controversial is where there has been political influence that has led to the establishment of task teams or units of one kind or another. So to me, it's not entirely clear, or not at all clear, let's put it that way. What is the difference if there's political influence, political directive calling for a unit to be shut down? In what way is that more or less operational than directions or directives for unit or task teams to be established? So to me, I remain unconvinced. I don't know what the evidence is that there was any clear provision that the minister violated. There might be protocols, informal or formal protocols that I'm not aware of that have been violated. But as I said, I'm not aware of them. But as far as I can know of, purely looking at the Constitution and the SAPS Act, there isn't a clear violation that I'm aware of on the part of the minister. whether his actions were well considered, whether he was exercising good political or judgment, whether he was exercising his authority in a responsible way is another question. But I'm not aware that he clearly violated or was in breach of his powers.
Through you, Chair, I think Mr. Bruce came with a mandate. I'm going to put it clear to you. He's not convinced about anything. We are talking about something in KwaZulu-Natal, where our honorable member comes from. He says the killings have subsided because of the PKT, PKTT. You said no, we are not convinced. I'm saying to you, Mkhwanazi, the head of legal department, she said that in the Nhlanhla commission, that the minister was wrong to disband that. We are saying there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, we are the first person who ever said that here. I'm even shocked.
I don't think you're accurately representing what I've said. What I've said is that he wasn't in clear breach of any legal provision.
I'm saying, irrespective whether clear or not clear, Nomvalo made it very clear in terms of the Police Act. I don't want to go there. But we said, in total, what you presented to us here, you are trying to convince us to say nothing, there's nothing wrong with what happened, the disbandment of the PKTT. And that the PKTT has worked wonders. We are not convinced of anything.
That's not what I said.
What are you saying, really? Because the submission is here. What you submitted to us here, and we are still arguing to say, there's nothing wrong, there's nothing clear about it, and we are saying to you, there's a difference. The people of KwaZulu-Natal are better off today. And we are talking about the lives of our people there. People were being killed in that province. And we are saying it was wrong for the minister to disband the PKTT. You said, no, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm saying to you, I'm putting it to you that...
But I didn't say that. So why are you saying that I've said that? Because I did not say there was nothing wrong with it. I said it was not in breach of a legal provision.
Yeah, so in other ways, if there's no breach, there's nothing wrong. Whether people are dying or not dying...
I said it might have been a poorly considered or ill-judged decision.
No. No, we are playing with words here.
Okay,
I'm saying to you, Mr. Bruce.
With words. I'm not playing with words. I'm responding to your assertions.
Mr. Bruce, the time of Mr. Skosana had expired, so
Yeah, thank you.
he was asking you questions on borrowed time from the chair. Can we afford Honorable Cameron?
Chair, I actually don't have many questions rather than a comment on the submission process. We're not here to oppose people that come and submit something. We listen to their opinion. We invited them. They are our guests. If we don't like what they say, that's fair enough. We can debate that later on when it comes to the report. Mr. Bruce is not a witness. He is an absolute expert in his field. If anyone did their own research, they would know that. And I think it would be fair to say that we need to give him a fair chance to speak. And once that is done, the committee can deliberate further whether we agree or not. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bruce, good afternoon. I don't have many questions. I just want...
Chair, my hand is up.
Honorable Matthews.
Okay.
But Chair, are you going to recognize me?
Can I continue, Chair?
Yes, continue, Honorable Matthews.
Okay, so Mr. Bruce, you said you've been in the field research or following police generally for 30 years. You're making submissions to us regarding interference, political interference in the policing establishment opposed to operations. You have followed all the ministers of police since, I think you said 1996. So stuff might be getting lost in translation here. So I would like you to give us some practical examples of any of the ministers who you think, or who you would categorize rather as overstepped. There was political interference, the name of the minister and something that they did that supports what are you talking about in terms of political interference, or whether it was political directives. So I think that will help us get clarity on your submissions, because I think now stuff is getting lost in translation. Okay, besides the matter that has us here, so that one we
Right,
can
okay.
park because it's been
So-
debated over and over. So let's start off, like maybe you can just give us an example of 5 different ministers in your experience that.
See, well, you see, the answer to that is that this kind of controversy around the manner in which the minister exercises his or her power has not been a frequent occurrence in South Africa. Insofar as ministers have not frequently faced allegations that they've been exercising their powers in an irregular manner. Okay. And so the one very obvious example is when Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi was the acting national commissioner, and what emerged there. And so it illustrates this point that would appear to me, it kind of appears to illustrate the point that police leaders generally comply with political authority, and generally, are reluctant to resist their political bosses. But in the case of General Mkhwanazi, then there was a Lieutenant General by the name of Richard Mkhwanazi, who, cumulatively was on the one hand facing very serious charges, including charges of murder, and also in relation to other issues of corruption. And the police had taken action to suspend Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi and subject him to a disciplinary process. And what Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi said was that he had been placed under pressure, and he gave evidence about this before this committee, as far as I understand, where Minister Mthethwa, the late Minister Mthethwa, then wished him to withdraw the disciplinary charges against Richard Mkhwanazi. So that's the one example. The one very interesting example. So then.
Okay, so let's go back. So I want you to be able to distinguish. So the issue of the interference with the acting national commissioner, and I think it was with the minister, Nathi Mthethwa, the late Nathi Mthethwa.
Yeah.
And you're saying Lieutenant General. So that is an example of political interference that was resisted, or that you considering that political directives. That's what we're trying to, I want to understand. I'm just trying to understand, what are you submitting? What is acceptable and what is not? In terms of what are you saying is good for the country?
Well, you see, that's a very clear example where there was someone who, what we know in the public domain is that for specific reasons, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who was had been appointed through an irregular process politically appointed as the head of the Crime Intelligence Division. Okay, and he enjoyed political favor as far as is understood, because he was seen as someone who supported the political interests that were in power at that time. And so then pressure was brought upon Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to withdraw these charges against him. So it illustrates a case of political influence being used to protect a specific person who, by all accounts, should have been subjected to disciplinary procedure, should have been dismissed from the police. And effectively, as a result of this political pressure, this man remained on the payroll of the SAPS for another 6 years after. So, I mean, there's clear examples. There is the question about the political killings.
So what are the other clearer examples? So we've
Well,
got
well,
that
you-
one. Let's
you
talk.
see,
So
so-
you're saying
so-
the issue with Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi does not fall into the same category in terms of interference and directives from a minister as the issue with the political killings task team. That's what I'm trying to. Why? What
it's not
makes
clear
it
to me
different?
that they
Because
want
it's a directive.
Sorry,
Why? What makes it different?
whether it's a legitimate interest or not.
So who decides that it's a legitimate interest or not?
Well, that can be a difficult question. But I mean, in the case of relating to Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi,
Mhm.
it seems fairly straightforward that the police should have taken disciplinary action against him
Mhm.
and dismissed him from the SAPS.
Okay. And then the political killings task team?
Well, you see, the one observation that I've made is this point that insofar as there is political engagement, the basic point, one of my most basic points is this point that insofar as there is political engagement with the police, it very frequently focuses on questions to do with what are priorities, what are not priorities. It focuses on questions of priority. And so if one looks at the economic infrastructure task teams, if one looks at the political killings task team, if one looks at other types of task teams that have been established,
Mr. Bruce, I
they
think
are
we're getting
established
off.
under political influence. So to me, it's not clear what is the difference between a directive for a task team to be shut down and another political directive. To me, they seem to be equivalent. And so if the one is acceptable, then it seems to me that, by implication, the other type of directive is also, it's not self-evidently something that the minister shouldn't be doing.
So you don't think the directive in the first place to establish it was a problem either?
It isn't seen as a problem, and I'm not saying that it is a problem.
No, but you making presentations here, so we're asking you on how you would characterize it, and you can justify it.
No, you see,
That's what we
I have a reservation about this because you see, for instance, there's 25,000 murders in the country. Political killings task team is concerned with, I don't know. I mean, the total caseload over about 6 years was something like 612 cases. I'm not quite sure how many of those were murders, but that's one small fraction of the overall problem of violent crime. So,
Okay, but
there's
we're
a
going
question
off
about.
here. My question, Mr. Bruce, was perhaps the initial instruction to establish it, because it was given by the president to deal, the president of the ANC was the president of the country at that time, because the ANC members and some other political parties were killing each other. Was that probably the problem?
You see, I mean,
Because it's given an operational
in
issue.
2013, I wrote an article motivating for task teams or dedicated units to be established to address political.
But I'm not talking about, we're not talking about the why, right? We are talking about the instruction, right? Not the why, etc. The actual instruction for the president to say, tell them, go and establish, and then the minister to say, the instruction to the acting minister that they must make those corruption charges of the Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi to go. I'm talking about the instruction. Is it political interference or not? Forget the part of the the backstory of it. We're talking about the instruction. When is it a directive, or directive that is interfering with operations? Because that's what you need to tell us here.
Well,
Because you are arguing the point on the substance, on whether the
point is that
political killings
it is
task team.
operational in nature. It is
Okay.
operational.
So we can even argue that the initial instruction to establish it was political interference.
That's you see, well, it was political influence, certainly.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
It's not, I wouldn't say it was inappropriate interference. But, and as a result of that, it isn't clear to me that
Okay.
by its nature, the instruction to close down the task team was irregular. But I think the critical question is in some ways what the motives were. And I don't think it was a good, I don't think it was a well-considered instruction, partly because, for instance, the task team had an existing caseload, and closing down the
So your
task team
submission,
overnight
okay.
seems to have been, at the very least, poorly considered.
Okay.
As a
So your
direct-
submission here, if I need to sum it up, the directive of political influence, right, is based on what the motive is. In summary, that's what you're saying. Then if the motive is considered acceptable for whoever, according to, let's say you for an example, then it's not considered political interference.
Well, you see, I mean, I think it's also then clear that it would be appropriate. There's elements of this issue that are much clearer. So, for instance, for directives to be given regarding the investigation or prosecution, the investigation of a specific individual, or how the police should deal with a specific case, anything like
So
that.
it's
I
about
think that would be
merits.
clearly irregular. Okay, and would clearly be, would clearly cross the line. But if we're just talking, sorry, I thought this was on silent. It is, I don't know what's going on. I've got a phone that just isn't. Gonna throw it at the wall or something. Sorry.
Okay. I think we understand the submission that we should look at what the motive is on the directives. And then just my last question, well, maybe you're not going to be able to answer it as you were not sure about, or you weren't able to tell us about your funders and whether there's been any investigation into the people who actually funded the organization. But as far as you know, does the ISS get lobbied by political parties to present particular positions? Or are they aligned with a particular political party?
No, as far as my understanding is that the ISS has a kind of open approach where it would offer advice to any political party, but it wouldn't, insofar lobbied by. No, I don't think that the ISS does.
So
that
you're
at all.
immune to being lobbied by a political party for a particular position?
Well, I mean, my understanding is that what the ISS tries to do is be open to role players in the policing field in South Africa, for one thing, and that those would include political parties. So the ISS is certainly open to engaging with all political parties.
How many political parties, to your knowledge, has the ICC engaged with? ISS. It is, yeah? ISS. Do you know?
I can't answer that.
So maybe if you can speak to those who would know, and we can get a submission on political parties that you'll have engaged on, or engaged in, or engaged with, rather, just so that would be able to.
Yeah, in my experience, it's primarily been the governing party and the official opposition. But yeah.
Okay. I'm done. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you. Honorable Nhlanhla.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. I almost forgot what I wanted to say, but I have not forgotten. Chair, we must not live with a wrong impression and a wrong information here. Our understanding is that when presentations have been made before us as members of this committee, we are duty bound to engage them. We've not come here to peruse or listen and go home. We've come here to listen to presentations and engage. And engagement does not necessarily mean you must always agree. Where we disagree, and hear the views of the people who have been making presentations. So there is nothing peculiar with disagreeing, because people who are making presentations must be confident in what they have presented. If our disagreements are wrong, then they must prove us wrong. So we're not here to come and receive information. We have not at least drove from our provinces to come and do that here. We've driven from our provinces to come and listen and engage Tara. And engaging Tara means we can disagree when there's a need to do so. So that's our understanding. I've been tempted to raise this by what Honorable Cameron has said. It's completely wrong. Thank you.
Honorable Mnwango.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I have no question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Sauls.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Bruce, good afternoon. Your submission cites a large gray area between policy and operations. Is it your expert finding that the current SEPS Act is too vague to prevent political interference?
Thanks for the question. I would say it's not a question of vagueness. I would say it simply doesn't address the issue. So you know, in my experience, what seems to me to be a positive source of reference for engaging with this issue is this experience, you know, which happens in so far as I've, you know, read about the issue. It's been something that's come up. It's for one reason or another in these states of Australia, and has been addressed by legislation in, you know, these states in Australia and New Zealand, and it seems to me to be, you know, a kind of sensible kind of approach that's taken in many of these jurisdictions.
So I'm still just being mild when I say vague. You are saying it totally doesn't address.
That's right. Yes.
All right. In your expert opinion, the SEPS Act in its current form, are you saying that it is a problem because it doesn't address or protect clearly against political interference? You're saying the act is the problem. It doesn't matter which minister is there. The act is the problem. So that no matter who comes, no matter who occupies the office, as we sit here now, if the act is in its current form, the current minister that's there, if he does the same thing, then the act has not adequately addressed it, and so also anybody else that comes. Is that your submission?
Well, you see, I mean, again, it's this point that my impression is that police leaders are often disposed to comply with political authority. The willingness to resist political authority is often not there. And so whether it's irregular or not, their orientation is to see it as something that they must do. And I think one could say that this is illustrated in this case by the manner in which, for instance, the National Commissioner responded. That the National Commissioner seemed, if it wasn't for the press conference in July, you know, this wouldn't be on our table. It isn't something that the National Commissioner himself would have gone public about necessarily. And so it's more like when there is the will on the part of a chief of police, national commissioner, whoever might be, where the chief of police feels unhappy, doesn't want to comply. These types of provisions may empower them to do so. And they may also inform the manner in which ministers exercise their authority. So, but you know, the nature of the minister, if I'm understanding your question, you know, one obviously has some ministers who might be more disposed to exercising their authority in a irregular manner than others are.
Okay, now let me rephrase the question. In your research, does the lack of a clear definition for the term used in the Act, ministerial directions, create an environment where a minister can interfere in operation?
I would say yes, that's correct.
All right. You cite New Zealand and Kenya. How does the lack of a written record for ministerial directions impact the constitutional principles of accountability and transparency?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the short answer to that is that it enables them to be entirely absent if they, you know, if these types of directions are not recorded in some way.
Mhm.
You know, it makes it possible for the minister to completely deny that he or she has ever issued directions or instructions of this kind.
And to support that position, would I be correct in saying that the reason why we're sitting here now is because the directive was given in writing?
That's entirely correct. I completely agree with that. It was because it was in writing. If it hadn't been given in writing, it could have simply been denied, and there would be, you know.
So your proposal is it should be a standard rule that all ministerial directives must be in writing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mhm. The Marikana Commission you mentioned recommended clarifying these powers over 10 years ago. In your expert opinion, has the failure to amend the SAPS Act since then been a failure of legislative oversight?
You know, I'm not keen to point fingers about people having failed. What I would say is that it clearly hasn't been taken seriously as an issue, as a political concern. This is, you know, this is in many ways the first time in South Africa that I've seen concerns about the manner in which the authority of the minister is exercised being foregrounded as a type of political concern.
All right. Now, let's move away from the political emotionalism. Let's deal strictly with research, and let's deal with the law and the lack in our law, because that's where your focus really is on in terms of your research. So let's test that. Does your research show that the persistent drive to create specialized task teams, does your research show that it actually, in reality, weakens the overall ability of SAPS to solve murders?
The one answer to that is merely to point out that the SAPS itself has repeatedly raised points of that kind, and I can refer you to at least one or two, I think maybe 3 presentations which have been given by the SAPS, where you can see there's this concern expressed about this tendency to establish task teams without consideration on the impact that it has on other units.
I would think that you are referring to what you mentioned in your submission to us, that your research showed that the detection rate for murder is exceptionally low. It's currently reported by SEPS at only 11%. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And so, sorry, there's a point that I wanted to make here that's just escaping me. Yeah, but the point that I would make, you see, is that I see the creation of task teams as in many ways a stopgap measure. That what's needed is an overall approach to strengthening the detective function within the SAPS, and that's been absent. And so instead, what we have is this thing of the available resources being directed in one way or another to deal with what is inevitably a very small aspect of the overall problem of serious crime in South Africa.
Maybe by using the 11%, it doesn't really express why you are so concerned. So tell me if I'm correct if I rephrase it in this way, that if we say that the detection rate of murder is 11%, in other words, what that statistic says, that is not your statistic, but the statistics by SEPS. What it actually says is that 89% of murders goes unsolved.
Yes, that's right, yes. And so it illustrates to me the point that we should have a much more well thought through approach to strengthening our investigative response to crime.
Yeah. Let's dig a little bit more deeper so that we look at what you're actually saying. In KZN, the KZN paradox, and when we deal with now the specialized task teams versus the reality, the claim is that the political killings task team, the PKTT and other specialized units are touted as the solution to KZN's violence. But the reality is that KZN remains a killing field, contributing 21.4% of all murders in South Africa. Let's localize it a bit. The hotspots, despite heavy task team presence, Inanda police station in KZN remains the #1 murder station in the country. But let's not run the risk of just focusing on KZN, because the problem here that we are addressing, or that you're talking about, that I see in your submission, is not really just focused on KZN. Let's come to the Western Cape. The reality is, just like KZN, the Western Cape has numerous specialized units, anti-gang units, and the other units. Yet, it maintains a staggering murder rate of 60 per every 100,000 people. But there's task teams in the Western Cape. Murder rate is not dropping. It's not about the PKTT. It's about the country. You have at the Cape Flats, on the Cape Flats, between 11 and 20 murders every week. It's a bloodbath. And then you have the Eastern Cape. The Eastern Cape, according to our official stats, the Eastern Cape has the highest murder rate in South Africa. 69 out of every 100,000 people. But there's no attention given there. Why not? If the issue is really dealing with murder. So what I hear you saying is that resources are captured for elite specialized task teams, leaving the average detective at a local station overwhelmed with work and underfunded. You are saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but why take so much money and we put it into specialized units of between 30 and 60 people, where every station in our country, the detectives are struggling, no money to solve the actual murder rates that is increasing within our country. And that is really why you are saying there should be a refocus and invest our money on detective work overall in the country rather than on units. Am I correct?
I think what you're, there's part of me that largely agrees with what you're saying. On the other hand, I do think that there's a debate. It is, and not that we've got time to debate because we're talking about people's lives and so on, but nevertheless, it seems to me to be valid to, in certain circumstances, prioritize certain aspects of the crime problem. And, one of the arguments that I'm, for instance, sympathetic to is, for instance, specifically the killing of whistleblowers. But similarly, if we're trying to maintain a democratic political system and political office bearers, their lives are in jeopardy. Particularly, I think it has often happened that those who have been killed have been those who've stood up against corruption. So I think, there are often arguments that certain aspects of the problem of crime should be prioritized, even relative to other forms of crime that by many accounts are just as serious. So, it's not that, I accept that there are different approaches to this problem that are both valid, and it is an issue of decision making. So, it's not that I necessarily condemn these decisions to establish these task teams, but I don't think that the consequences of, the impact on other units are ever really properly taken into account. And the second point that I would make is that they have effectively been used as a stopgap measure, that what we need is a much more comprehensive approach to how to strengthen, firstly, our detective service and the policing system more broadly.
Where I come from, El Dorado Park, born in Kliptown, raised in Klipspruit West, there's a saying that summarizes what you just said. Goedes moet balance. You are saying it's not either or.
Yeah.
It's both, but there must be a focus on balance. But the biggest priority should be, once the specialized unit or task team is created for a particular crime issue, once that issue is managed, controlled, stop, close, and ensure that there's not local police stations and detective work all over the country is not negatively impacted by this focus on the units. There must be balance and prioritize. For what's the use? You have strong task teams, but weak detectives, detective units at stations all across the country. And you have general murder rates increasing, but that specialized issue is decreasing, but the overall problem is just getting bigger and bigger. Goedes met balance. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So ISS and yourself as a researcher there, you have confirmed what the people already feel. Our security strategy appears to be a performance, not a strategic, clear and decisive action plan. We have task teams in KZN, in the Western Cape, yet both provinces remain hotspots of blood. Meanwhile, the Eastern Cape, which is the deadliest province in the Republic at 69 murders for every 100,000 people. In the Eastern Cape, being murdered is no longer a rare tragedy. It is a statistical probability. You're talking about a society where almost every single family is either mourning a victim or living in immediate fear of becoming one. It is the deadliest place to exist in the Republic according to statistics. Yet, it is left to rot because it doesn't offer the right optics for a task team launch. We are chasing 100% headlines while only solving 11% of the murders. This must end now. And I join you in that call. We must stop the political capture of police resources for specialized units and task teams and return to the constitutional mandate of a professional, independent, and effective detective service that protects every single South African, whether they live in a high-profile metro or a neglected rural village. I thank you, sir.
Thank you.
For your time. Chairperson, thank you so much.
Mkhwanazi. Wait.
No, Chair, there was a mistake. When I was supposed to speak, Babu Skhosana took over. And when you came back, you thought I'm not speaking. So I just didn't want to phazamisa izinto sekhuluma Babu Skhosana. Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Now, I won't take long. It's just clarity of certain questions, Chair. Nhlanhla abantu abathanda ukuphuza amanzi. Nale nsizwe iphuza amanzi nayo, Chair. Evening, sir. Oh, it's afternoon actually. Sawubona. How are you, sir? You can press there.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, I'm fine. I take it you don't speak Afrikaans?
I don't have good Afrikaans. I read a bit.
Oh, I noticed when Honorable Souls was speaking Afrikaans to you, a surprise. Just clear me here on these questions. Firstly, if you were to advise the president, how soon would you advise him to fire Minister Mkhwanazi? It's a question.
Chair, may I be excused from answering this question, if you don't mind? I don't think it's sort of really within my mandate here at this committee.
Are you really
If
sure?
You can proceed.
Okay. No, the reason I'm asking this is that, you see, Mr. Hofmeyer, when he left here, he said he's proud of the Seven administration, that we are the protectors of South Africa. So as you come here with your proposal, which we appreciate, and also thank you for your time that you put on your proposal, we must really scrutinize what you are telling us here. So I am starting there because I want to understand, if you were sitting with the president, how soon would you advise him to fire Minister Mkhwanazi? based on what you've seen and observed in the country. I take it that you wrote this proposal judging the country, the entirety of the SAPS and the minister. I take it you wrote this document because of that. So I'm asking, how soon would you advise the president to fire Minister Mkhwanazi? Unless you wouldn't. Is your interest for South Africans?
Sorry, I'm just, I'm not in a position of advising the president.
If you were?
And I'm not clear whether Minister Mkhwanazi is currently the minister or not. I'm just, it's a bit unclear to me as to exactly what the current position is.
What are the chances that your proposal is not fully researched? Because I noticed that most of your staff here speaks of international relationships. We should learn from other countries, Australia and all that. So are you well vested in South Africa?
So are you, I'm not quite sure where your questions are going to. Do you want to?
I'm just trying to establish.
I'm a researcher. I've worked here for 30 years.
Yes.
What do you mean by fully researched, if I can ask you that? Because, the level of information that's available out there is enormous. And I never engage with all of it. Okay. So try and, work in a responsible way and, do my best, but I'm not, I could never be claimed to be
the best,
on top of everything that's been written or published about any particular topic.
Okay. The thing is, you said that the minister might have not breached. So I'm thinking you are well vested of the topic you are talking about, which is the minister. So you should know whether he's fired, he's suspended, or he's still acting, or whatever he's doing. I take it you should be knowledgeable on that note, on that subject.
Okay, that's okay. If you do take that's.
Now I'm asking.
I accept that.
Okay. Do you know the current status of Minister Mkhwanazi regarding his employment?
My understanding when I've tried to clarify it is that I've got various different answers. So I'm not entirely clear what the current status is.
You're okay. Therefore, how did you come to think that he has not breached anything in terms of this PKTT disbanding?
Okay, he's not, there's no, the Constitution authorizes the minister to issue directives. As pointed out by Major General Van Rooyen, neither the Constitution itself nor legislation provide clarity as to what the ambit of that power is. So, what I understand Major General Van Rooyen to be saying is that there isn't explicitly any provision which enables us to understand what the scope, what is and what isn't a lawful directive by the minister. And I've in my responses to other questions, I've also I've also drawn attention to is this fact that consistently task teams have been established under political direction. So to me, it seems to me to be whether one's providing political direction for a task team to be established or for a task team to be shut down, that seems to me to be a similar type of thing. It's not clear to me that those are qualitatively different types of instructions. So therefore, insofar as the one is generally regarded as acceptable, it seems to me that the other, it's not clear to me why the other is necessarily unacceptable, and so it's not clear to me that the minister is violating any provision. There's another there are other arguments about, for instance, the process that he followed, the motivation that he provided, etc. And I'm more sympathetic to those arguments. But insofar as anyone is trying to assert that there is any explicit provision that he violated, I haven't seen anyone actually say this is the provision that was violated, by including Major General Van Rooyen. I don't know of anywhere in her affidavit to the Nhlanhla Commission where she outlines which provisions were violated by him. And so, so that's the basis for my understanding.
What would you blame this to? The Constitution as well? This clarity.
Well, my understanding is that it's something that can be addressed in legislation, that they, but, so I don't blame it, but I think, so for instance, the Marikana Commission in their report called for this issue to be clarified. And so if there had been more attention, I think it would have had to come first of all, from a political level to the recommendations of the Marikana Commission. That was, that's one, situation in South Africa where the issue has been raised and where there's been a call for attention to be given to the need to clarify this point.
Somehow in this regard, I agree with you, somewhere, somehow, not entirely. But this is my view. I think this Roman Dutch law that we are using in South Africa is failing us. Hence, you saw a need to address this matter, but you didn't check where is the problem. I think the problem is our constitution is completely not a South African constitution. Hence, I have a problem with when you say we should be looking at Europe and what. I'm a South African. I love South Africa, unfortunately. But I think I agree, though you may not agree, while we agree, me and you, that the constitution is the problem. But let's leave that. This Roman Dutch law must be changed. Tell me, what's your take on the disbanding of the PKTT? Do you think it was correct?
Right. Well, you see, the first thing I would have said that I would say is, if one was to close down the PKTT, one should have followed, the idea of closing it down effectively overnight, by the end of the month, seems to have been a poorly judged instruction. And so, at the very least, any instruction on this matter should have, first engaged with questions about the current cases that were being dealt with by the PKTT, and also with the question about what is the current level of political killings, and whether there's a need for this type of team, a task team dedicated to political killings to be maintained for the purpose of addressing political killings. So, for instance, in the minister's instruction, it doesn't say anything about what is the current number of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. On that level, I don't think it was a well-considered direction.
But do you think it was correct? It was a good decision? Are you for it?
No, but I just said I don't think it was well considered.
You don't think so? But what's your take on the PKTT? Do you think what's your take on it?
On the PKTT?
Are we benefiting as a country?
From the PKTT?
Yes.
You see, I would say that's a complicated question, to which I don't have a simple answer. But I would refer back to the questions and the exchange that I had with Honourable Saul.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you hear Honourable Saul when I was speaking about the money and the money spent on PKTT? I kind of disagree with him there. I think we should complain about the money of national dialogue because it bears no benefit for us. I should complain about that. I think you should complain about that as well, rather than complaining about the money for PKTT, which bears benefit to us, some of us who are coming from such townships and stuff like that. But let's pass there. Have you met with any political parties on the subject you have here on the table?
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No,
Have you met with Minister Mkhwanazi?
no, I haven't.
I kind of found some similarities because I was kind of disturbed on your proposal. That's why I had to ask a lot of questions so that I really understand what you were saying. I feel like you have been lobbied. Instead of proposing, you more of went for protecting Minister Mkhwanazi and trying to prove that he is correct and right. That's why I lost the proposal. But since we have now had it, we've spoken, I now understand that what's your proposal. But tell me, what is South Africa going to benefit from your proposal?
Well, you see, I mean, I think what we would like to have is a policing system where the police are professionals and are able to exercise independent judgment about the policing issues that they're faced with. And so insofar as political influence prevents them from exercising independent judgment and responding to the crime situation which they're dealing with in the best possible way. I think measures to prevent political interference might empower them or support them to better be able to implement what one could call professional policing.
All right, no, thank you, sir. Thank you for coming. Chair, I would like to propose something, Chair, if you can. I think this time allocation in terms of today was beneficial to South Africans. So in the remainder of the witnesses that are about to come, I think if you can allow such interaction and more time, South Africans will benefit because we missed a lot of opportunities with the last witnesses where we asked 15 minutes and 10 minutes and we never got to get to the gist of the issues. So I'll propose to you and plead with you, Chair, that if possible, kindly allow this kind of system. It's proper. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, only on condition that alternate members will not speak. Honorable Vessels.
No, thank you, Chair. No questions from me. And let me just also welcome the presentation and the submission. But no questions from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Kawazel. I'm going to have an online engagement now in case you finish before I come back. Honorable Mngango will preside and call the meeting off and announce that we are starting at 11 tomorrow.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruce. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Okay, so it means we have come to the end of the proceedings. Mr. Robert David Bruce, thank you so much. Thank you, honorable members. Let's start at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Andile, Bonani, and Pilot, Nicolette, can we make sure that tomorrow before we start, we provide comprehensive answers to the issues that members have raised this morning? Thank you so much. The proceedings have come to an end, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Mr. Sean Tate, for staying the course and for also pledging your solidarity to ISS. We want to thank you so much. Honorable members, you may stand up and leave the chambers.
Thank you, Chair.